Let's now continue with this theme as tributes are pouring in for former Deputy President David Mabuza, who served under President Cyril Ramaphosa during his first term. Mabuza passed away on Thursday afternoon at the age of 64 following a short illness. He is being remembered as a formidable political figure and a humble, committed cadre who dedicated his life to serving the people of South Africa. To reflect on his legacy and contribution, I'm joined now by Sifiso Mtsweni, who's a former chairperson of the National Youth Development Agency. Mr. Mtsweni, good to have you on the program despite the circumstances. You come from Mpumalanga, from what I understand, and have witnessed the political evolution, if you will, of the province firsthand. How would you personally characterize David Mabuza's legacy here?
Good evening, and thank you for having us here. I think as a start, I would like to join the President of the Republic, the African National Congress, as well as the rest of the people of this country in expressing our sincerest condolences to the family, the friends, and the comrades of former Deputy President David Mabuza. Look, yes, as much as I've got my ancestral background in Mpumalanga, most of my activism has happened in the Western Cape, where we grew up in the ranks of the Youth League, we grew up in the ranks of the ANC, and it is through my interactions, particularly in the Youth League National Executive Committee, where one has had to meet the former Deputy President, who was still the chairperson of the ANC in Mpumalanga. And really what stuck out for me at the time was that here was a person who was quiet, who was polite, but yet very intimidating, very firm, but a person who was well known for his ability to bring people together, his ability to plan, and his ability to organize. So it's really a great loss, particularly for the people of Mpumalanga. I think many have told stories and tales around how former Deputy President, as Premier of Mpumalanga, he's been able to build a strong province. He's been able to encourage tourism into Mpumalanga. He's been able to build a strong ANC in that particular province. Hence, he was able to be elected as ANC Deputy President with the full support of that particular province.
Mr. Mtsweni, given his rise from a teacher and a student activist to Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, what lessons, or positive or even cautionary, can young political leaders then take from Mabuza's trajectory?
Well, I think that is a very important aspect of his life. Former Deputy President is known for having been very close to young people. He was very passionate about youth development, and I think part of why he was so passionate about young people is from his background as a teacher. I myself, during my tenure as a chairperson of the NYDA, and with Comrade DD being 2 months into his office, he addressed the commemoration of Solomon Kalushi Mahlangu, where we're celebrating close to 150 graduates of the Solomon Mahlangu Scholarship Fund. And he insisted really to be part of that particular process. From that moment, we've worked very closely with the former Deputy President. Around 2019, I was honored to be appointed by him to serve as part of the National Human Resources Development Council. Again, another structure that was put in place by government to deal with the human resources blueprint of our country. And at the center of the former Deputy President's message has always been youth development, has always been how do we resolve the question of youth unemployment in this country? How do we ensure that young people have access to education, free education, but also ensure that those who do not have are able to enjoy an education system that is all-rounded. That means that an education that provides for tuition, that provides for books, that provides for meals, that provides for safe spaces for students to really be able to be safe and really meet their full potential. So his background as a teacher was quite fundamental in his role as a Deputy President and in his role as a leader in general going forward.
When reading some news reports related to Mabuza's death, some are describing him as a political entrepreneur. Do you think this label is a fair characterization of his leadership style? Why or why not?
Well, I characterize him more as an enigma. Deputy President was a very complex person. I always say there's a difference between complicated and complex. He was a very complex person in the sense that those who were close to him can really attest to the warmth that he possessed, the passion that he had for this country, the passion that he had for the people of Mpumalanga, for the members of the ANC, and the passion with which he really carried himself, particularly in the different roles that he has played. But for those who've not really gotten to know him, they would believe all sorts of tales around him. There were times where people believed that this man is dangerous, this man is quite a plotter. You would remember that he himself called himself a cat. And as you know, the old adage that the cat has got 9 lives, he survived quite a lot of things. But I think from my side and my own experience of him is that he's no entrepreneur at all. He has a person who's passionate about unity of this country. He has a person who's passionate about youth development in this country. He has a person who's a real patriot. That's why today and yesterday, I presume, almost every minute, you can see each and every South African actually having some form of a view about the life of the former deputy president, because he has touched each and every South African, whether you knew him or whether you did not know him. Everybody has an opinion about the former deputy president. But for me, he is a real patriot, and this country has really lost a great deal.
As we look at South African politics, let's speak about the so-called Premier League, where reported names such as the former president, Deputy President Mabuza, Ace Magashule, as well as Ntate Supra Mahumapelo. I mean, these were individuals who are seen as a powerful faction, if you will, within the ANC. Let's speak politics now. From your vantage point, how did this bloc shape national youth development, if at all?
Well, of course, the ANC faced quite a difficult period, particularly post 2007 Polokwane conference, where almost all gatherings of the ANC were characterized by factions, characterized by divisions. And of course, former deputy president was not immune from those particular challenges. I mean, it culminated in the Mangaung conference in 2012, and as well as the 2017 national conference of the ANC. But it was at that moment where the former deputy president really almost had what I call a moment of epiphany, where he really woke up and realized that a divided ANC divides society, and a divided society cannot reach its full potential. And this is why deputy president at the time, part of the Premier League, yes, but he was able to stand up and say that we need a united African National Congress. And to demonstrate how unity works, if you look at how Mpumalanga was, I mean, under David Mabuza, Mpumalanga electorally, the ANC never got anything less than 85% throughout his term. But because of the divisions in the ANC, you would have seen that election after election, the ANC began to lose some ground. And up until today, you can see that the ANC sits at around 40% electoral support, not because people in this country have turned their backs on the ANC, but precisely because the ANC was unable to manage its own internal contradictions and allowed factions to be able to run the organization. And I think one message across the tapestry of everybody that speaks about the former deputy president is that he strived for the unity of the ANC. So I would like to remember him really as a person that sought to unite the African National Congress, notwithstanding the role that he would have played before.
Yeah, as you rightfully said, he did coin the name that he is the cat, but he was also seen as a kingmaker at the ANC's 2017 conference, switching allegiance to President Cyril Ramaphosa. What does that move tell us about the state of internal party politics, but also the role of pragmatism versus principle here?
Well, that's why I'm saying that just before that conference, by the way, this moment of epiphany that I'm speaking about, he had been talking about it throughout the year. He's actually said to structures of the ANC in Mpumalanga that as opposed to nominating whatever slate that you would have wanted to belong to, rather nominate unity. And those ballots were seen as spoiled ballots. And of course, him having been part of what you characterized as the Premier League, they have always been perceived as people that, of course, would support former President Jacob Zuma and whatever it is that people thought President Zuma at the time would have wanted. But I think in the main, he did what he thought was in the best interest of the ANC. And of course, history will have to judge whether the posture that he took at that particular time was the correct posture for the ANC. But I think in the main, it was for me, it was not a question of him switching allegiance. For me, it was a question of him trying to demonstrate that if you are to achieve unity, sometimes you even have to turn against your own. Sometimes you have to take sacrifices in order to ensure that there's a greater good, which is the unity of the ANC. Whether that message was listened to by that conference or not, as I said, history will actually judge. But for me, there was no switch. It was just a question of him demonstrating that factions in the ANC are no longer sustainable. We need to come together. We need to build the ANC so that it leads transformation in this country.
Mr. Mtsweni, thank you so much for your time and insight tonight. Really, his reflections have added a rich perspective on the complex legacy of David Mabuza. Of course, reflecting on the life and times of the 64-year-old Deputy President, or former Deputy President.